Let's be honest, no one really talks about what happens after the scrubs come off. Behind every nurse's calm smile and every doctor's confident tone, there's often an exhausted heart quietly whispering, "I can't keep doing this." And yet, the world expects healthcare professionals to show up, day after day, with endless compassion and steady hands. But what if the real key to healthcare burnout recovery isn't found in another self-help book or a new time management hack, but in something ancient, quiet, and often overlooked: faith? Now, before you roll your eyes, I'm not talking about blind religion or cheesy "everything happens for a reason" quotes. I'm talking about that deep, grounding faith that anchors resilience, the kind of spiritual strength that keeps physicians steady during a code blue, or gives nurses the courage to walk back into the ICU after losing a patient. Faith under pressure in medicine isn't just poetic, it's survival. And when caregivers learn how to reconnect with that inner calling, they don't just survive the system, they start to heal. So what if burnout isn't a sign of weakness, but a sacred invitation? What if your fatigue is actually the whisper of purpose calling you to rediscover your why? In this video, we'll explore how faith and resilience for nurses, spiritual encouragement for doctors, and caregiver emotional healing can reignite the flame that medicine tried to smother. Because when the stethoscope feels heavy and your soul feels tired, there's still hope, and it begins with faith. The hidden battle, when compassion turns into exhaustion. Every healthcare professional starts with a purpose, a calling that feels sacred. But over time, the emotional weight of endless shifts, emergencies, and goodbyes can turn that calling into quiet fatigue. Many nurses describe feeling like they're running on empty, giving pieces of themselves they no longer have. It's a silent struggle, one that even coffee and weekends off can't fix. And when the hospital lights dim, that's when the battle really begins, the one between faith under pressure in medicine and the creeping shadow of burnout. You see, compassion fatigue doesn't just drain energy, it drains meaning. When a doctor starts questioning their spiritual calling, or a caregiver wonders if their efforts even matter, the heart begins to shut down long before the body does. That's why faith and resilience for nurses aren't luxuries, they're lifelines. Faith reminds healthcare workers that their worth isn't measured by the number of patients they save, but by the love and purpose behind their service. It's what transforms exhaustion into empathy and chaos into calm. And here's the twist most people don't expect. Healing begins not with doing more, but with pausing long enough to remember why they began. Some find that pause in prayer, others in quiet reflection during a night shift, or even through a whispered thank you after a hard diagnosis. The moment one reconnects with that sacred why, burnout starts to loosen its grip. But this awakening is just the first step, because the real journey begins when we explore how to rebuild inner strength from the inside out. Rebuilding inner strength, the spiritual core of resilience. When healthcare feels like an unending marathon, physical stamina isn't enough. It's the spiritual core that keeps people standing. Doctors and nurses who thrive long-term aren't necessarily the toughest. They're the most spiritually anchored. They've discovered that faith in stressful healthcare environments acts like an internal compass, guiding them back when they lose direction. It's what turns just surviving into serving with purpose. Without that foundation, even the strongest professional can crumble under the weight of unrelenting pressure. Think of a nurse during a night shift, overwhelmed by alarms and anxious families. In that chaos, she closes her eyes for 5 seconds, whispers a prayer, and breathes. That's not weakness. It's nurse burnout faith in action. It's her way of saying, "I'm not alone in this." Faith gives healthcare workers permission to stop carrying the burden by themselves. It transforms the sterile hospital room into a sacred space, where every act of care becomes a small miracle. And the more they nurture that quiet connection, the stronger their mental resilience grows. Building this kind of spiritual strength isn't about adding one more task to the to-do list. It's about creating micro moments of stillness. A doctor might start each shift by setting an intention. May I bring peace where there's fear. A caregiver might read a passage that reminds them why healing matters. These rituals create a buffer between the chaos and the soul, allowing healthcare worker mental resilience to thrive. And as that resilience deepens, something extraordinary begins to happen. It starts to heal not only the caregiver but everyone they touch. The power of perspective, turning fatigue into fuel for purpose. It's easy to see exhaustion as the enemy, but what if it's actually the messenger? Many burnt-out nurses and doctors find that their fatigue isn't just physical, it's spiritual. It's their soul saying, something's out of alignment. When they listen, instead of pushing through, that's where transformation begins. This shift in mindset, seeing burnout not as failure but as feedback, can awaken a deeper sense of purpose for healthcare professionals. It's not about quitting the field, it's about rediscovering the faith that once ignited their passion for healing. Imagine a physician sitting alone after a grueling double shift, feeling empty. Instead of numbing that ache, he asks, "What is this feeling trying to teach me?" That's physician's spiritual strength in motion, the courage to see fatigue as a doorway to growth. This kind of reflection doesn't come naturally in medicine's go, go, go culture. But when caregivers allow themselves to pause and listen, they often find renewed hope for burnt-out nurses and spiritual renewal for doctors blooming where despair once lived. Faith turns fatigue into a sacred teacher, not a silent tormentor. Overcoming fatigue in healthcare isn't about denying pain, it's about transforming it into purpose. Journaling after a shift, sharing struggles in faith-based support groups, or volunteering outside the hospital can reignite that spark of service. Every moment of exhaustion holds a lesson if we're willing to see it. And once this new lens of purpose takes root, the next challenge becomes learning how to protect that flame, how to keep the spirit strong even when the system around you feels broken. Protecting the flame, guarding your spirit in a demanding system. In healthcare, the system often feels like a relentless machine, charts, alarms, endless rounds. It's no wonder so many professionals lose their spark along the way. But here's the secret the most grounded caregivers know. You can't pour from an empty cup. Protecting your spiritual energy isn't selfish, it's survival. Whether it's a nurse practicing gratitude before each shift, or a doctor setting firm boundaries for rest, these habits of faith under pressure in medicine keep the inner fire alive, even when the outer world feels chaotic. Think of spiritual support for nurses as emotional armor. It doesn't make them immune to stress, but it helps them process it differently. A quick prayer before a code, a few moments of silence after a loss, or writing one thing they're grateful for each day. These simple acts build resilience brick by brick. They remind healthcare workers that beneath the scrubs and the pressure, they are still human beings with hearts that need care too. That's what caregiver resilience through faith looks like in real life. Quiet, consistent, and powerful. And let's be real, the system rarely makes it easy. Policies may shift, staffing may shrink, but faith becomes the unshakable center. When a doctor faces moral distress or a caregiver feels unseen, returning to their spiritual calling becomes their compass. Protecting that flame isn't about isolation. It's about connection, to God, to purpose, to others walking the same path. And once that flame is steady again, something beautiful happens. The light starts spreading outward, igniting healing in ways most never expect. From healing others to healing self, the full circle of faith. Every healthcare worker begins their journey wanting to heal others, but somewhere along the way, they forget that they too need healing. The truth is, you can't truly bring life to others while ignoring your own soul's needs. Healing for hospital staff starts when they realize that faith isn't just a belief system, it's a daily practice of renewal. Whether through reflection, worship, nature walks, or moments of stillness, reconnecting with faith allows burnt-out caregivers to breathe again, to feel whole, to remember that they are more than their job title or the number of patients seen. When nurse faith journeys evolve into personal healing journeys, transformation ripples through the entire healthcare ecosystem. A nurse who prays before treating a patient radiates calm. A doctor who takes time to meditate before a tough conversation delivers compassion instead of exhaustion. Spiritual encouragement for doctors and faith for exhausted caregivers become the antidotes to emotional depletion. As each professional begins to refill their own well, they naturally begin pouring hope into others without draining themselves dry. That's the quiet miracle of faith in medicine. And maybe that's what faith was always meant to do, not to erase fatigue, but to transform it into empathy, purpose, and renewal. When caregivers embrace this sacred rhythm of giving and receiving, they find balance in a world that often demands more than it gives. Because in the end, true resilience isn't just bouncing back, it's growing deeper roots. And those who walk this path of healthcare burnout recovery through faith soon discover that their healing was never separate from the healing they give. It's all part of one divine circle. So here's the truth. Healthcare will probably never be easy. The pace won't suddenly slow down, and the emotional weight won't simply disappear. But what can change is how you carry it. The difference between breaking down and breaking through often comes down to one thing: faith under pressure in medicine. When you anchor yourself in purpose, when you remember your why, that's when burnout loses its grip and healing begins, from the inside out. Now let me ask you, when was the last time you cared for yourself with the same compassion you give your patients? When was the last time you paused to reconnect with your spiritual calling, to breathe, to simply be? Maybe this video was your reminder that hope for burnt-out nurses, spiritual renewal for doctors, and caregiver emotional healing aren't distant dreams, they're decisions. Little ones, made every day, that slowly rebuild the soul. So, if something stirred in you today, don't let it fade. Nurture it. Start small. Pray, journal, walk, breathe. Whatever faith looks like for you, give it space again. Because your work matters. You matter. And the world needs the kind of healing only you can give, refreshed, grounded, and full of purpose. If this message spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, tap that notification bell, and stay with us as we keep exploring faith, resilience, and renewal in healthcare. You're not alone on this journey. And the best part? Your healing story might just inspire someone else's tomorrow.